All right, thank you. I am going to continue with the questioning, and I appreciate all of you all being here and your good hard work at the FCC. A lot of my interests are really along the same lines as Senator Moran, representing a rural state, an underserved state in terms of connectivity, and some of the challenges that we've had trying to get us to close the digital divide in a small state like West Virginia. So Chairman Carr, he did talk about the mapping issue and the issues of small providers alleviating the barriers that they have, and then the possible penalties that they might accrue if some of the maps are inaccurate or if they're unable to failing to serve locations that do not actually exist and are not residential or their business. Do you have the necessary data from agencies to be able to have more accurate maps? And, you know, as we get down to the nitty-gritty here where we are actually going to get to the last house, the last home, this is going to really be important. So where are you with the maps, and what kind of formulations for improvements have you considered, and you as all of you?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for your leadership on this issue. I think we've actually been making some real significant progress on the mapping issue. The fabric itself, the locations are starting to stabilize. You're seeing less than 1% change in terms of iterations of the map. We've solved a lot of issues. One that's popping up recently, and that I've heard from you, is the challenge process. And it's difficult because some could argue that the original provider would have an incentive to overstate, and then others would say that the challenging provider would have incentives to overstate their challenge. And we have a regulation of that process, but perhaps we need to do a little bit better job at streamlining that, and I'm open to looking at that.
All right. Commissioner Trusty, did you have something to say on that issue, on the mapping?
Sure. One of the issues that I've heard about on mapping is just the sheer testability. How do you test whether or not broadband is available in a particular area? And I know that FCC staff is working very closely with providers to try to make this a more efficient process and less costly.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez, do you have anything to add there?
No, I agree with my colleagues. We still hear complaints, of course, both of where areas are so served that are actually not served,
right,
which is problematic. So the staff continue to update the map, and every iteration makes it better, but it still needs improvement.
Right, and a lot of these areas, there's the smaller providers, capacity is an issue to be able to help verify. So anything that can smooth that process would be very much appreciated. Chairman Carr, I appreciate the work, and it's interesting to listen to the debate over the broadcasters in terms of consolidation and everything. I mean, I have a view similar to what Senator Moran expressed, in that in the rural areas, our local broadcasters are so essential. And he even mentioned the top three: weather, sports, local government. And they're to try to preserve that local news. As we've seen what's happened to our newspapers, our broadcast is so very important. We just had a food drive, and our local television providers, did this and publicized it so that it was much broader and bigger than it would have been without that local flavor and that local input and involvement. So a number of senators wrote to you to ask that the FCC, what you're doing to ensure that our local broadcasters are able to compete in this changing landscape. And I think he mentioned that as well, and he mentioned the letter. What is the update on the ownership rule proceedings that the commission has started since we sent the letter over?
Well, thank you, Senator. We are, very open-minded as to how to resolve that proceeding. We haven't made a final decision yet. I think this is actually one area where I heard some strong alignment between me and Ranking Member Cantwell on this. She talked about the importance and value of local news, particularly when there's natural disasters. Right. One of the things I'm trying to do with our media policy as a general matter is to re-empower those local broadcasters to invest in local news, because what's happened over the years, we've had a consolidation of power into what are national programmers, Comcast, Disney, and others. And effectively, a lot of local broadcast stations are just mouthpieces for that national programming made in New York and Hollywood. And I'm not sure that's going to be consistent with the public interest, again, when it comes to a natural disaster like in Washington State right now. So one of the lenses that we're looking at this media ownership proceeding is that consistent with our goal of constraining the power of some of those national programmers? But we haven't made a decision there yet.
Thank you. I'll be interested to hear what happens there. I will say, as a compliment, when I first started in this role and got very active with rural broadband, there was a lot of confusion in a state such as mine as, who's covering this area? Can RDOF go? Can Reconnect go? Can BEAD go? And you mentioned more programs than I even had concept of that are still trying to, as I said, connect that last home and last mile. We're hearing less about the lack of coordination between all these different entities. And I think that's, particularly at the federal level, and I think that's extremely important because, number one, we don't want to overbuild, but we don't want to underbuild too, and we don't want to squash innovation. So I thank you all for your efforts in that. I think it's been very helpful, and I appreciate that we can keep working on that because I think that'll make the dollars go quicker and make the connectivity come faster as well. So with that, I will recognize Senator Markey.